They said Ethan Caldwell had it all. An empire built from the ground up, a waterfront mansion that stood as a symbol of power along the pristine shores of Newport, Rhode Island, and a wife so stunning and poised she seemed like she had stepped out of a dream. When the news broke that his beloved wife, Juliana Caldwell, was finally expecting, high society rejoiced. The Caldwells were the picture-perfect couple, wealth, beauty, and legacy intertwined. Yet, beneath the glittering galas and carefully curated smiles, whispers began to spread. Rumors of another woman, another pregnancy. The night Juliana discovered the devastating truth, her world collapsed in an instant. Without hesitation, she slipped off her wedding ring and walked away. In that moment, Ethan felt a chill of dread creep down his spine. He had just lost everything. For years, Ethan had been untouchable. At 40, he had transformed Caldwell Holdings into a billion-dollar real estate empire, with prime developments in New York, Miami, and even London. His name commanded respect in boardrooms, exclusive clubs, and extravagant yacht parties, where champagne flowed endlessly, and deals were sealed with a handshake. Wherever he went, cameras followed, his sharp navy suits and easy charm making him the golden boy of the business world. But it was Juliana who brought true prestige to their marriage. The youngest daughter of Victor Langley, a revered philanthropist known for funding children's hospitals across the country, she had inherited not only his striking features, but also his heart for giving. Tall, elegant, and effortlessly gracious, she devoted her time to charitable causes, hosting benefit galas and advocating for underprivileged families. Together, they seemed invincible. He, the brilliant mogul, she, the compassionate philanthropist. Their home, the Langley estate, was a masterpiece of luxury. Towering windows framed breathtaking ocean views, while marble floors gleamed beneath glittering chandeliers. Outside, manicured gardens bloomed with roses and jasmine, surrounding an infinity pool that shimmered beneath the summer sun. It was here that Juliana hosted fundraisers, her presence drawing in both old-money elites and eager investors. Meanwhile, Ethan worked the crowd, charming potential partners with his vision for the next groundbreaking project. To outsiders, their life was a fairy tale. But behind closed doors, the cracks were forming. Ethan's relentless pursuit of success often left Juliana alone, her soft footsteps echoing through the vast halls of their mansion. Nights turned into waiting games, her sipping tea by the dim library fire, hoping to hear the familiar sound of his car in the driveway. But instead, there were late meetings, unexplained business trips, and carefully worded excuses. She told herself it was temporary, that his ambition was what made him the millionaire husband she had fallen in love with. But deep down, an unsettling feeling gnawed at her, a whisper of doubt that would soon become impossible to ignore. Juliana sat alone in the vast sunroom, her fingers tracing absent-mindedly over the curve of her growing belly. The golden hues of sunset stretched over the Atlantic, casting long shadows across the floor. This was once her favorite time of day, the quiet moment before Ethan returned home, where they'd sit by the fire and talk about everything, about nothing. But those days were gone. The pregnant wife of a millionaire was supposed to be glowing with joy, anticipating the arrival of her first child. Instead, Juliana felt hollow. The rumors had finally reached her in a way that could no longer be ignored. A name, Heather Sinclair, whispered at a gala, spoken in hushed tones between women who offered her looks of pity rather than admiration. And then she had seen it for herself. Her hands clenched into fists as she remembered the sight of them together. Ethan, her husband, her partner, standing beside another woman, the one he had betrayed her with. The way Heather's hand rested so possessively on his arm, the way the camera flashes captured their proximity. That moment shattered whatever fragile hope Juliana had clung to. She had left without a word, slipping away into the cold night, her heart pounding as she drove back to their estate. Now, sitting in their home, the mansion that once held dreams of a happy family, she realized it wasn't hers anymore. Not truly. Her father, Victor Langley, had come to see her earlier, his presence a silent pillar of support. "You don't have to stay, Juliana," he had said, his voice gentle but firm. "You don't have to fight for something that isn't fighting for you." But the decision had to be hers. That night, Juliana packed in silence. The soft rustle of clothes, the muted zip of a suitcase, small sounds in the cavernous space that once felt like home. She folded a photo of their wedding day, her hands trembling over the image of a man she had once believed in. The man who had promised forever. Then, she took off her wedding ring. The diamond, once a symbol of love and commitment, felt foreign against her skin. She placed it on the bedside table, exhaling shakily, as if removing it had lifted some invisible weight from her chest. Juliana had been the devoted wife of a millionaire husband, the woman who stood gracefully at his side through every gala, every deal, every public moment. But tonight, she was something else. A woman walking away. She stepped into the waiting town car, the headlights cutting through the darkness. As the driver pulled onto the winding road, a sleek sports car suddenly sped toward them, its tires screeching to a stop. Juliana's breath hitched. She knew who it was before he even stepped out. Ethan. Heather prided herself on her ability to handle delicate situations. Salvaging the reputations of high-profile men was her specialty. Ethan Caldwell, however, was a different kind of challenge. He wasn't just another CEO in need of an image fix. He was powerful, charismatic, and, more importantly, vulnerable in ways he didn't even realize. She had done her research. Caldwell Holdings was expanding aggressively, pouring millions into developments across major cities. That meant enormous PR budgets, high-profile campaigns, and lucrative contracts. Exactly the kind of opportunities Heather thrived on. But what began as a calculated business move had quickly turned into something else. She saw the cracks beneath his polished exterior. The loneliness that came with being a billionaire husband constantly on the move. Over quiet dinners and late-night conversations, Ethan confided in her about how Juliana was so consumed with philanthropy that she barely noticed his absence, how exhausting it was to uphold the image of the perfect power couple, when, in reality, their marriage felt like a business arrangement. Heather listened, nodded at the right moments, and made sure her presence felt like the escape he never knew he needed. Their professional meetings soon turned into casual lunches at exclusive bistros, then secret weekend getaways disguised as business trips. Any lingering guilt Ethan might have felt was buried under the rush of passion and the belief that Juliana was too busy to notice. But she did. When Juliana announced her pregnancy, she expected Ethan to slow down, to make space for their growing family. Instead, he became more elusive, drowning himself in work. A week after the announcement, he left for Chicago, sealing a multi-million-dollar deal, and within days, he was off to Los Angeles for an urgent meeting. The estate in Newport felt emptier than ever. The staff avoided eye contact, their politeness tinged with quiet sympathy. Juliana, a pregnant wife, should have been surrounded by love and excitement. Instead, she sat alone in cavernous rooms, listening to the wind howling outside, wondering if her husband would ever truly come home. She shared her worries with Marjorie Lane, her college roommate and closest friend. Marjorie didn't hesitate. "You need to confront him, Juliana. Find out the truth." And so she did. That evening, after another ignored phone call, Juliana made a decision. She grabbed her coat, stepped into her car, and drove straight to Ethan's Manhattan condo, a place he rarely used anymore. Her heart pounded as she arrived unannounced. The doorman, recognizing her, hesitated before letting her in. That flicker of uncertainty in his eyes was the first warning sign. Inside, the air smelled different, perfumed, unfamiliar. A stray black hair on the pillow, a half-empty bottle of expensive perfume in the bathroom. Juliana's stomach knotted. The evidence was undeniable. Juliana stepped into the dimly lit condo, her pulse hammering in her ears. The doorman had hesitated before letting her in, a flicker of unease in his expression that sent a sharp chill down her spine. She had told herself she wasn't here to confirm the worst, but deep down, she knew better. The scent in the air was unfamiliar. It wasn't the clean, woodsy fragrance Ethan always wore. It was floral, sweet. Her eyes scanned the space, landing on the first clue, a half-empty bottle of perfume on the bathroom counter. A brand she never used. Then, a stray black hair on the pillow. Her stomach clenched. She stepped toward the dresser, fingers trembling as she picked up a spa appointment card. The name printed neatly across the top made her blood run cold. Heather Sinclair. The room blurred as a wave of nausea hit her. Juliana had prepared herself for doubt, for suspicion. But seeing the proof in front of her, Undeniable, shameless, felt like a knife to the chest. She pressed a hand against her belly, her heart breaking at the realization that she was carrying the child of a man who had been lying to her. She didn't remember leaving. The next thing she knew, she was back at the estate in Newport, locking herself in the library, her hands clutching at the silk of her dress as silent tears streamed down her face. For months, she had ignored the signs. She had convinced herself that being the pregnant wife of a billionaire husband meant she had nothing to fear, that her place in Ethan's life was secure. Now, that illusion was shattered. Still, she couldn't confront him. Not yet. She needed more. More proof, more clarity, more strength. And so, she waited. Days passed in a blur of restless nights and carefully constructed smiles. She threw herself into charity events, putting on a brave face for the cameras, while donors congratulated her on the baby. But every whispered rumor, every sympathetic glance from high society acquaintances was another twist of the knife. Ethan remained elusive. His calls were brief, his excuses rehearsed. "I'll be home soon," he had promised. But Juliana no longer believed in his words. Her breaking point came the night of the black tie gala at the Museum of Modern Art. Ethan had assured her he'd be there, his wife, 6 months pregnant, standing proudly at his side. Yet, as she arrived in an elegant burgundy gown, scanning the glittering crowd beneath the dazzling chandeliers, she realized he was nowhere to be found. A sickening dread settled in her stomach. Where was he? Juliana stood near the edge of the gala, swirling her untouched champagne as conversations hummed around her. The dazzling chandeliers reflected off polished marble floors, casting a golden glow over the glamorous crowd. Yet, despite the grandeur, she felt out of place. She was supposed to be here with Ethan, the billionaire husband who had promised to stand by her, especially now that she was carrying his child. But as she scanned the room, her stomach twisted. A familiar voice broke her thoughts. "Juliana, dear?" She turned to see Stephanie Moore, a longtime acquaintance and fellow philanthropist, hesitating before stepping closer. "I'm so sorry, but I have to ask, is everything all right between you and Ethan?" Juliana's grip on her glass tightened. She forced a polite smile. "Of course, why do you ask?" Stephanie's brow furrowed. "I overheard something disturbing." She hesitated before continuing. "People are saying Ethan has been seen around town with another woman, Heather Sinclair." Juliana's pulse pounded in her ears. "I'm sure it's just business," she replied smoothly, though her voice wavered. But Stephanie's sympathetic expression said she knew better. Then, the room fell eerily silent. The hushed murmurs, the subtle shift in attention, the flash of cameras. Juliana turned toward the grand staircase, and her breath caught in her throat. Descending the steps was Ethan, and at his side, looped possessively through his arm, was Heather Sinclair. Juliana felt the blood drain from her face. Heather's sleek black cocktail dress clung to her, her expression poised and confident, as though she belonged at his side. Ethan didn't pull away. He didn't look uncomfortable. He simply walked forward, guiding Heather toward a group of executives. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Eyes darted between them, then toward Juliana, 6 months pregnant, standing utterly alone. For a split second, Ethan's gaze met hers. His confident stride faltered, but Heather's grip on his arm tightened, her lips curving ever so slightly, and Ethan kept walking. A roaring filled Juliana's ears. She couldn't breathe, couldn't move. The betrayal wasn't just real, it was public. The whispered rumors, the late nights, the lies, all leading to this. The weight of humiliation crashed down on her, pressing against her chest. She turned on her heel, pushing through the sea of stunned faces, past curious glances and murmuring voices. Outside, the cold wind bit at her cheeks. Her hands trembled as she climbed into her car, slamming the door shut. She had come seeking clarity. But there was no room left for doubt. Ethan had made his choice. Back at the estate, Juliana collapsed to the library couch, silent tears slipping down her face. The words of their wedding vows echoed in her mind. In good times and bad. For better or worse. But now, those words felt meaningless. Something inside her shifted. The man she loved had betrayed her. Not just behind closed doors, but in front of the world. And she could no longer pretend everything was fine. Heather tapped her fingers against the cold exam table, her polished nails clicking softly. The sterile scent of antiseptic filled the small private clinic room, but her mind was elsewhere. She hadn't expected this. When the doctor returned with the results, she barely heard the words. Pregnant. The room felt like it had tilted. She had come here assuming it was exhaustion, stress, anything but this. Yet, staring at the ultrasound screen, the grainy image of a tiny life forming inside her, reality crashed down. This changed everything. At first, Heather's affair with Ethan had been about power, attaching herself to a billionaire husband with influence, money, and access to a life she had always craved. But now, with Juliana also pregnant, she knew exactly how dangerous the situation had become. That evening, she stormed into Ethan's Manhattan condo, her stilettos clicking sharply against the hardwood floor. He was pacing, phone pressed to his ear, no doubt trying to contain the damage from the gala scandal. The moment he saw her face, he tensed. "Heather, this really isn't a good time," he muttered, rubbing his temple. "The board is furious. The press won't let up, and I'm trying to. I'm pregnant." She held up the ultrasound printout, the tiny image staring back at them both. Ethan froze. The air between them grew unbearably still. For a second, Heather thought he hadn't heard her. Then, slowly, he exhaled and sank onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. His mind raced. Juliana was already 6 months pregnant, heartbroken, and now this? Guilt clawed at his chest. Heather crossed her arms. "Are you going to say something? Or should I just assume I'm on my own here?" He lifted his head, eyes flickering with a mix of panic and disbelief. "Are you sure?" His voice was barely above a whisper. Heather rolled her eyes, shoving the ultrasound printout toward him. "What do you think?" Ethan stared at the image. It felt surreal. If this got out, the scandal would explode beyond anything he could control. One pregnant wife was bad enough, but a mistress carrying his child too? "What do you expect me to do?" he finally asked, his voice hoarse. Heather placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch deliberate. "I expect you to take responsibility. For me. For this baby." Ethan's chest tightened. He had thought he was in control. He had underestimated just how much his reckless choices would cost him. Heather's voice softened, her fingers grazing Ethan's shoulder. "You have to support me and our baby," she murmured, her gaze locking onto his. "Whatever that means for us or for Juliana." Ethan's throat tightened. He couldn't find the words. Every breath felt heavier than the last. He had built a life of power, of control, but now he was trapped in a double betrayal with no way out. His marriage, his reputation, even his future. Everything was unraveling. Meanwhile, Juliana's heartbreak had reached its peak. A full week had passed since the gala, yet Ethan hadn't called. No explanations, no apologies, just deafening silence. She forced herself to keep busy, spending her days finalizing the details for the children's hospital wing her father had sponsored. But each meeting felt meaningless, every polite conversation hollow. It was during a routine prenatal checkup that clarity finally struck. Lying on the exam table, she listened to the rhythmic whoosh of the fetal heartbeat through the Doppler. The sound was steady, strong, her baby growing inside her, completely unaware of the turmoil surrounding them. A lump formed in her throat, but she refused to cry. That evening, she sat alone in the sunroom, gazing at the horizon where the ocean met the sky. The sun dipped low, setting the water ablaze with hues of gold and crimson. Her father, Victor Langley, arrived unannounced. He stood by the doorway for a moment before quietly stepping forward, his presence steady and reassuring. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Are you all right, my dear?" Juliana inhaled deeply. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm alive, Father, but it hurts. I never imagined Ethan could do something so public, so cruel." Victor's usually calm demeanor darkened. He had always respected Ethan, admired his ambition, but now his expression was unreadable. "If he can't appreciate you," he said firmly, "then he doesn't deserve you." Juliana's fingers instinctively brushed over her growing belly. "But what about the baby?" Her voice cracked. "I want my child to have a father, but not one who openly parades another woman like I don't exist." Victor nodded solemnly. "Whatever you decide, you have my full support. Whether you fight for your marriage or walk away, I will stand by you." His words settled deep within her. For months, she had waited, for Ethan to change, for their marriage to mend, for the man she loved to prove he was still the person she had believed in. But something shifted inside her. She realized she was done waiting. Juliana lay awake, staring at the ceiling as the weight of heartbreak pressed down on her chest. The mansion was silent, but inside her mind, echoes of the past screamed louder than ever. Ethan's late nights, the whispered rumors, the gala where she had stood alone while he walked in with another woman. There was nothing left to wait for. As dawn approached, she finally moved. She flicked on a small lamp, the warm glow illuminating the once cozy bedroom that now felt like a prison. Her gaze landed on the wedding photos perched on the mantel. In one, Ethan beamed at her, his love seemingly undeniable. But now, she wondered if it had all been a lie, or if that love had simply faded, little by little, until there was nothing left. She inhaled sharply, her father's words echoing in her mind. "Protect yourself and the baby first." That thought steadied her trembling hands as she pulled out a suitcase, placing it on the bench near the closet. The hush of the early morning felt almost sacred, the house holding its breath as if it knew what was coming. She folded a few maternity outfits, soft sweaters, and comfortable shoes, carefully stacking them inside. Next, she packed her prenatal vitamins, a stack of medical records, and a small velvet box containing personal keepsakes. Her hands hesitated over the box. Inside was the delicate necklace she had worn on their honeymoon, a reminder of happier days. She closed her eyes, fingers brushing over the cool metal before placing it inside. Then, with a deep breath, she turned to the final task. She reached for her left hand, staring at the diamond wedding ring that had once symbolized forever. Now it felt like a cruel reminder of everything she had lost. Slowly, she slid it off. The weight of it disappeared instantly, but the ache in her chest remained. She set it down on the bedside table, the small metallic clink echoing louder than it should. This was it. She didn't know what life would look like from this point forward. But she knew one thing with certainty. A pregnant wife deserved more than a husband who betrayed her. The morning sun painted the horizon in soft gold as she stepped away from the bed, her resolve strengthening with each passing second. Ethan might regret his choices, but she refused to be trapped in the ruins of their marriage any longer. For the first time in months, she felt a glimmer of freedom. The wedding ring caught the light as it rested on the bedside table, a final reminder of the vows Juliana had once believed in. The diamond gleamed faintly under the soft glow of the lamp, a stark contrast to the emptiness she now felt. For weeks, she had agonized over what it represented. Once a symbol of love, now a reflection of betrayal too painful to bear. She took a slow breath, whispering a silent goodbye to the life she had built. Then, with careful precision, she closed her suitcase and stepped away. The household staff had sensed the shift long before she had made her decision. Ever since the scandal broke, they had moved with quiet sympathy, offering unspoken support. It was no surprise to find Lucinda Perez, the long-serving housekeeper, waiting by the hallway, eyes filled with unshed tears. Juliana managed a sad smile, placing a gentle hand on the older woman's shoulder. "I'll be in touch," she said softly. "Thank you for everything." Lucinda's voice wavered. "We'll miss you, Mrs. Caldwell. Please take care of yourself and the baby." In the foyer, the grandfather clock chimed 5 times, its solemn echo filling the empty corridors. Outside, the first traces of dawn painted the sky in muted shades of pink and gray. The air carried the familiar scent of salt from the ocean beyond the cliffs, a smell Juliana had once associated with peace. Harrison, the longtime family driver, stood by the sleek town car, his expression unreadable. He had already loaded her suitcase, leaving the trunk open as if giving her a chance to change her mind. She paused at the grand front doors, inhaling deeply. This estate had once been her dream, the place where she and Ethan had imagined raising a family, where they had hosted extravagant parties and spent quiet nights by the fire. Now it felt like a beautiful prison, its walls holding nothing but broken promises. Her chest tightened, but she refused to waver. She stepped outside, pulling a light shawl around her shoulders as the crisp morning air wrapped around her. Harrison opened the car door and she slid into the seat, exhaling in quiet relief. The engine rumbled to life, the smooth purr of it almost soothing as they began rolling down the long driveway, past the perfectly manicured hedges and rose bushes. Then headlights appeared at the far end of the path, cutting through the dim morning light. Juliana's pulse spiked. The sleek sports car barreling toward them was unmistakable. Her breath caught as recognition sent a jolt of anxiety through her. "Ethan," Juliana's heartbeat pounded against her ribs. For a fleeting moment, she considered telling Harrison to keep driving. Let Ethan fade into the distance. Let him deal with the consequences of his choices alone. But the blinding glare of his headlights and the reckless speed at which he had pulled up made her hesitate. If she ordered the driver forward, would he chase her? Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Stop the car," she murmured. The sleek town car rolled to a halt, just as Ethan's tires screeched against the gravel, sending a cloud of dust into the morning air. He stumbled out, hair disheveled, shirt rumpled. He looked like he hadn't slept. His eyes locked onto hers through the tinted window. Raw desperation etched into every line of his face. "Juliana," he called, voice hoarse, breathless. "Please, roll down the window. Let me talk to you." Everything in her screamed to drive away. Run. Never look back. But then she felt the faint stir of movement inside her. A reminder that, for better or worse, Ethan was the father of her child. Her fingers trembled as she pressed the button, lowering the window just enough for the cold morning air to rush in. Ethan leaned down, his breath uneven. "I got here as soon as I could," he rasped. "Lucinda told me you were leaving. Don't go. We need to talk." Juliana let out a bitter laugh. "Talk?" The word tasted like acid on her tongue. "After you humiliated me in front of the entire city? After you ignored my calls? Let me stand alone at events while you paraded her around?" Pain flickered across his face. "I know I messed up. I swear, Juliana, nothing was how it looked." She clenched her jaw. "Heather doesn't mean anything compared to you." The words twisted something inside her. "Compared to me?" she echoed, her voice shaking. "She's carrying your child, isn't she? Or is that just another lie?" Ethan flinched. His silence spoke louder than any confession. A sharp sting burned behind Juliana's eyes, but she refused to let the tears fall. She would not break in front of him. "You made your choice," she whispered, voice barely audible over the wind. "It's time I made mine." Ethan reached for her hand through the open window, but she pulled back before his fingers could graze hers. "Don't leave like this," he pleaded. "Let me fix it. I'll do whatever it takes. You have to believe me." Juliana shook her head, forcing herself to stay composed. "Believe you?" she repeated, disbelief thick in her voice. "You let me find out about your affair through whispers and tabloids. You walked into a gala with another woman while your pregnant wife stood alone." Ethan opened his mouth, but no words came. The confident billionaire husband was gone. In his place stood a man drowning in regret. Juliana saw nothing but raw regret in Ethan's eyes. It wasn't just guilt. It was devastation, a reflection of the heartbreak he had caused. A sudden movement inside her made her inhale sharply. The baby kicked. As if sensing her turmoil, she instinctively placed a protective hand over her belly. Ethan's gaze dropped to the gesture, his expression tightening. "Juliana," he whispered, voice hoarse, thick with emotion. "For the baby's sake, give me a chance. I love you. I love our child." Tears burned her eyes. She shook her head, her voice trembling. "Don't." The first tear slipped down her cheek, but she didn't wipe it away. "Don't you dare talk about love. If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this. You wouldn't have turned our marriage into a public spectacle. You wouldn't have paraded Heather around like I never existed." Ethan's shoulders slumped. Defeat carved deep lines into his face, his once unshakable confidence completely shattered. "I know," he murmured, "but I can change. Please. Just don't leave like this." Juliana sucked in a sharp breath, fighting the wave of emotions threatening to pull her under. A whirlwind of heartbreak, anger, and nostalgia tangled inside her. She thought about how he once made her laugh, how safe she had felt in his arms, how they had built a life together. But those memories were eclipsed by the brutal reality of the last few months. Love wasn't enough anymore. Trust had been shattered, perhaps beyond repair. She exhaled, her voice quiet but firm. "It's too late, Ethan. I can't stay here." His jaw clenched, his hands curling into fists at his sides. "Juliana, please." She cut him off. "I need distance from you, from all of this. If I'm ever going to raise our child in peace, I have to protect myself first." Ethan opened his mouth to protest, but the driver, sensing her distress, pressed gently on the accelerator. The car began to roll forward. Panic flashed across Ethan's face. He stepped back, then forward again, his hands lifting as if he could physically stop her from leaving. "Juliana, wait." Their eyes locked one final time through the cracked window. Juliana pressed a trembling hand to her lips to stifle a sob before turning away. She let the tears fall freely as the car disappeared down the winding driveway, leaving the estate and Ethan in the past. She didn't look back. She couldn't. Ethan stood frozen in the gravel, watching helplessly as the taillights vanished into the early morning mist. The sun crested over the horizon, bathing the billionaire husband's grand estate in a golden glow, a painful contrast to the emptiness settling inside him. The morning air felt sharper now, colder. A cruel reminder that the woman he had taken for granted was truly gone. And in that moment, with the echoes of Juliana's anguish still lingering in the air, Ethan finally grasped the full weight of his actions. Regret surged through him. But it was too late. She was gone. The car carrying Juliana faded into the distance, taking with it everything Ethan had once believed was unshakable. Back at the estate, an eerie silence settled over the mansion, transforming it into something hollow and lifeless. The once grand halls filled with laughter and warmth now felt like a mausoleum to his past mistakes. Lucinda and the rest of the staff barely met his eyes. Their greetings were polite but distant, their usual warmth replaced with quiet disappointment. Newspapers piled up at the doorstep, each headline cutting deeper than the last. Billionaire husband's double scandal shocks New York. Pregnant wife leaves as mistress stakes her claim. Instead of returning to his Manhattan penthouse, Ethan locked himself away in his study. He ignored calls from his board members, unread texts from Heather, and even an email from Juliana's father. The weight of it all pressed down on him, suffocating. His mind wouldn't stop replaying memories. Juliana's laughter at their garden parties, the warmth of her hand slipping into his as they strolled along the beach, her unwavering support during every investor dinner. Then, the moment she had told him she was pregnant. He had taken it all for granted. He had sacrificed his family for fleeting thrills with Heather. And now, the reality of that mistake left him feeling emptier than ever. Hours passed before hunger finally pulled him from his chair. He stepped out of the study, only to find Lucinda waiting in the dimly lit hallway, a prepared meal in hand. "You need to eat, Mr. Caldwell," she said softly. "Mrs. Caldwell would want you to take care of yourself." Her words cut deeper than she realized. Juliana was the only Mrs. Caldwell, and now she was gone. His voice was hoarse. Has she called?" Lucinda's expression softened. "Not that I know of, sir." A hollow nod, a muttered, "Thank you." Then he turned back to his study, his appetite vanishing. The untouched meal sat on his desk, but his gaze landed elsewhere, on the small, glittering object resting among the chaos of scattered papers, her wedding ring. She had left it behind, a silent but deafening statement. Slowly, he picked it up, turning the diamond between his fingers. Once a symbol of unbreakable vows, it now felt like a verdict, a cold, undeniable condemnation of his betrayal. That night, sleep refused to come. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her. Tears glistening in her eyes, the crack in her voice as she told him she couldn't live a lie. The memory of her whisper, "I'm done," played on a relentless loop, haunting him in the darkness. For the first time in his life, Ethan Caldwell realized something terrifying. He had lost her, and this time there was no fixing it. For the first time in his life, Ethan Caldwell felt powerless. No amount of money, influence, or carefully crafted words could undo what he had done. He had built an empire from nothing, turned Lockwood Enterprises into a real estate juggernaut, but he had destroyed his own home with his own hands. The first rays of dawn streaked across the city skyline as he sat alone in his penthouse, staring at nothing. His chest felt hollow. He was truly, deeply sorry, but regret alone wouldn't bring Juliana back. Would she ever forgive him? Days blurred into a week with no word from her. The silence was suffocating. Desperate, Ethan reached out to her father, Victor Langley, only to be met with a curt response. "Juliana is safe. She does not wish to communicate with you right now. Please respect her decision." The words hit harder than any public scandal. Victor had once admired him, welcomed him into the family like a son. Now, even he had shut the door. Ethan tried again, this time reaching out to Marjorie Lawson, Juliana's closest friend. Voicemails filled with urgent pleas. "Marjorie, please. I need to see her. Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her anything. Just let me talk to her." None were returned. The fear began to settle in that she might have left the state, or worse, left the country. Then a lead surfaced from an unexpected source, Philip Marshall, an old friend of the Langley family. Ethan spotted him at a midtown cafe about to leave. Swallowing his pride, he rushed forward. "Philip, wait." His voice was strained, almost pleading. "Please, I just need to know if Juliana is okay." Philip hesitated, his expression tight with disapproval. "You have some nerve, Ethan," he said coldly. "After what you did, after humiliating her like that?" Ethan's stomach twisted. "I know, I deserve that, but for what it's worth, I need to know she's safe." Philip studied him for a long moment before exhaling sharply. "She's fine. She's taken a room somewhere private. Don't ask where. I won't tell you." Relief washed over Ethan, but it was short-lived. She was safe, but she was gone, and she didn't want him to find her. "I need to see her," Ethan pressed. "I have to tell her face to face that I regret everything, that I want to fix this." Philip's expression hardened. "This isn't about what you want. She's a pregnant wife carrying your child. You shattered her trust. She needs time. She needs space." Ethan's throat tightened. "I know, but..." Philip shook his head, his voice firm. "You think you can just show up with an apology and all will be forgiven?" Ethan swallowed hard, his hands curling into fists at his sides. His eyes burned, but he refused to break in front of Philip. "I've made the biggest mistake of my life." For once, there was no denying it. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, gripping the pen tightly. The letter in front of him blurred as exhaustion weighed on his body, but he forced himself to keep writing. His handwriting was uneven, the ink slightly smudged from where his fingers trembled. Every word was a confession, his weaknesses, his betrayal, and the overwhelming regret that had swallowed him whole. He wrote about stepping away from Heather, about how nothing mattered more than another chance at being a husband and father, about how, if Juliana could find it in her heart, he would spend every day proving that he wasn't beyond redemption. With a heavy exhale, he sealed the letter, pressing her wedding ring into the envelope, a token of sincerity, a symbol of everything he had destroyed. Now, all he could do was hope that Philip would deliver it, and that somewhere inside Juliana, there was still a shred of empathy left for him. That night, sleep came in fitful bursts. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw her. The way she had looked at him through the car window, her face a mix of heartbreak and finality. What if the letter wasn't enough? What if the next time he saw her, it was in divorce court? While Ethan spiraled in regret, Heather Sinclair found herself facing her own crisis. Several weeks pregnant, and entirely alone. Ethan had vanished after Juliana left. Calls to his phone went unanswered. His Manhattan condo was locked up, his presence at work sporadic. Heather had envisioned a life of luxury, of influence. A world where being tied to a billionaire husband meant endless power and security. But now, that fantasy was crumbling. Her finances were nowhere near what she wanted. She hated feeling powerless. But if Ethan wouldn't come willingly, she would force his hand. She carried his child, after all. He couldn't ignore that forever. Summoning her usual confidence, she arranged to intercept him outside Lockwood Enterprises. The black SUV blended seamlessly into the city streets, its tinted windows shielding her from the public eye. But the moment she spotted Ethan's car pulling up to the entrance, she stepped out, heels clicking sharply against the pavement. Ethan barely had time to react before she cut off his path near the lobby doors. His face blanched. "Heather," he muttered, his eyes darting around anxiously. "Not here." She folded her arms. "Why not? You've been dodging me for weeks." "Heather, we can't do this in public." His voice was a sharp whisper, his exhaustion evident. "Not here." She lifted her chin defiantly. "We can and we will. I'm pregnant with your child, Ethan. I need financial support, emotional support, something." His jaw tightened as he rubbed his temple. "Heather, look, this is complicated. Juliana left, and my entire life is upside down. I'm trying to fix one disaster at a time." Heather's eyes flashed with anger. Heather's eyes flashed with fury, her voice rising just enough to draw attention. "Oh, I see. My child is just another disaster to you." Ethan stiffened as a nearby security guard glanced their way. "You can't just run from your responsibilities," she pressed, folding her arms. He exhaled sharply. "I'm not running. But let's be honest, Heather, we never planned this. You told me you were on birth control." Her lips curled into a bitter smile. "Well, plans change." His jaw clenched. "You think I wanted this? You think I wanted to juggle two lives, too?" She cut him off. You think I wanted this? A child with a man who can't even keep one family together, let alone two? But here we are. He pinched the bridge of his nose, exhaustion creeping in. I'm not dismissing you, Heather. I need time. I have to figure out how to salvage my marriage, or at least come to terms with it ending. Heather stepped in closer, lowering her voice to a sharp whisper. You have 1 week, Ethan Caldwell. 1 week to show me a plan for how you're going to support me and this baby. Otherwise, I'll go public with everything. Your texts, the hush-hush credit card receipts, all of it. A flicker of panic crossed his features. She smirked, seeing it. Fine, he muttered. 1 week. Satisfied, she turned on her heel and strode away, the sharp click of her heels echoing through the lobby. Ethan remained frozen in place, dread twisting in his gut. He had already lost Juliana, and now Heather threatened to drag his name even deeper into the mud. For the first time in his life, time was slipping away, and he had no idea how to fix any of it. Far from the chaos of New York, Juliana found solace in a quiet lakeside inn, tucked away in upstate New York. The crisp autumn air carried the scent of pine and rippling water, a welcome contrast to the suffocating glamour of the city. Here, no paparazzi lurked, no whispers followed her. She could simply exist. Each morning, she walked along the lake, letting the cool breeze wash away the weight of heartbreak. Every step felt like defiance against the pain she had endured. Margaret Mills, the inn's owner and an old friend of her father's, offered her the perfect balance of space and warmth. Fresh flowers appeared by her window, blueberry muffins at breakfast, a quiet kindness that didn't ask for explanations. One afternoon, a familiar voice broke her solitude. Marjorie Lawson stood in the doorway, grinning, a small suitcase in hand. I'm moving in for a few days, she declared. You're not facing this alone. Tears welled in Juliana's eyes as she pulled her into a hug. Thank you, she whispered. I felt so isolated. Together, they fell into a routine. Morning walks, midday naps, and quiet evenings by the fireplace. For the first time in weeks, Juliana let herself breathe. She confided her fears, raising a child without a father, the ache of betrayal, and the strangest of all, the lingering pull of what once was. Marjorie rummaged through her purse one evening, pulling out a folded envelope. Philip Marshall gave me this, she said softly. It's from Ethan. Juliana's stomach twisted. Hesitantly, she took the envelope, her fingers grazing the familiar scrawl on the front. With a deep breath, she opened it, revealing a handwritten letter. Taped to the final page was her wedding ring. The sight of it sent a wave of emotions crashing over her. Her eyes skimmed the letter, her breath catching on Ethan's desperate pleas for forgiveness. He vowed to leave Heather, to fix everything, to be the man she had once believed in. A lump formed in her throat as she traced her fingertip over the ring, a symbol of promises once made, now broken. She remembered the day he had slipped it onto her finger, the certainty in his eyes, the warmth in his touch. Marjorie watched her carefully. What will you do? Juliana let out a slow, measured breath. I don't know yet, she admitted. Part of her wanted to tear the letter to shreds. Another part of her, the one that still held on to memories of the man she had loved, wondered if redemption was possible. But how do I trust him again? She whispered. The fire crackled softly beside them, filling the silence as Juliana absently rested a hand on her belly. A gentle kick reminded her of the new life she carried. The days spent at the inn had given her space to think, but the decision remained unclear. She needed answers, real ones. Her father, Victor Langley, had sensed her inner turmoil. Though he despised Ethan's actions, he believed in closure. And if nothing else, a civil conversation was necessary, for the sake of the baby. So, he arranged a meeting. Ethan stepped into Victor's Manhattan office, his face drawn, his posture heavy with exhaustion. The thick carpets muted his footsteps, but the tension in the room was impossible to ignore. Victor motioned for him to sit. Thank you for coming, he said coolly, his voice measured but firm. I won't pretend I'm happy about any of this. But Juliana is my priority, and you are the father of her child. Ethan swallowed hard, nodding. I appreciate you meeting me, sir. His voice was hoarse. I'm truly sorry for the pain I've caused your family. Victor studied him for a long moment before tapping a folder on his desk. These are legal documents Juliana's lawyers have drawn up. His tone was clipped. A formal separation agreement. Child support terms. and certain conditions regarding your involvement in her life, unless she chooses otherwise. Ethan's breath hitched. This was real. He reached for the folder, his hands shaking slightly. Was this his last chance, or proof that he had already lost everything? Ethan's hands trembled as he flipped through the documents, each page a stark reminder of the consequences of his betrayal. Alimony, custody schedules, prohibitions against contact with Heather if it risked Juliana's well-being. His throat felt tight. Does Juliana want a divorce? His voice was barely above a whisper. Victor's gaze softened. Just slightly. She's undecided, he admitted. But for now, she's protecting herself. Emotionally and physically. You need to respect that. Ethan exhaled, rubbing his forehead. I've cut ties with Heather, he said, his voice low. It's over. But she's pregnant. She expects support. A flicker of anger passed through Victor's eyes before he quickly masked it with his usual stoic calm. So, you have 2 children on the way. His voice was clipped. Quite the mess you've created for yourself. Ethan said nothing. Victor shook his head. If you care about my daughter at all, do the right thing. Step away from public drama. Stop calling her. Show her you can be responsible, not just a smooth talker. Guilt gnawed at Ethan's gut. I'll sign whatever Juliana needs, he said quietly. I'll pay whatever amount is required. I just want a chance to make things right. Victor studied him for a long moment, then slid the pen across the table. Sign, he said, and we'll see how she feels in time. Ethan hesitated for only a second before scrawling his signature on the dotted line. Each stroke felt like a painful acceptance of his reality. As he stood to leave, Victor met his gaze firmly. I love my daughter more than anything, he said. If you ever raise her hopes again only to break them, you'll regret it. Ethan swallowed hard and nodded. In that moment, he finally understood. Earning Juliana's forgiveness would be the hardest thing he had ever done. If he failed, he wouldn't just lose the mother of his child. He would lose every last shred of dignity he had left. Meanwhile, Heather Sinclair was quickly realizing that her grip on Ethan was slipping. She had tried to be patient, but he had grown distant, reducing their conversations to cold financial transactions. I'll set up a trust for the baby's expenses, he had texted. Talk to my lawyer if you need anything else. Gone was the playful charm. Gone were the empty promises of a future together. She felt cornered. And Heather Sinclair never let herself feel powerless. That afternoon, she stormed into Lockwood Enterprises without warning. Ignoring the shocked looks from staff, she pushed open the door to Ethan's executive suite, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floors. Ethan looked up from his desk, startled. Heather, he muttered. This is not a good time. Heather slammed the office door behind her, causing a sharp echo through the glass-walled suite. We need to talk, now. Ethan sighed, barely glancing up from his desk. Lower your voice, he muttered. What do you want? Heather's expression was set in grim determination. I'm not letting you walk away with a token trust fund while you run back to Juliana, pretending none of this happened, she said coldly. I'm pregnant, remember? You're as responsible for this child as you are for your pregnant wife. Ethan rubbed his temples, exhaustion weighing him down. I'm aware, he said tightly. My lawyers are handling the details. We'll set up arrangements, and we'll deal with this decently. Heather stepped closer, her eyes flashing. Decently? She repeated, voice dripping with sarcasm. There was nothing decent about how you seduced me, then turned your back when things got inconvenient. You made promises. Ethan let out a sharp breath, raking a hand through his hair. I never promised we'd be a family. I was reckless, yes, but I won't be emotionally blackmailed into a relationship that doesn't exist. I'll step up financially. That's all I can do right now. Heather gave him a bitter smile. You think money fixes everything? She hissed. Guess what? It won't fix the scandal when I tell the world how you juggled 2 pregnant women at once. How you tried to pay me off. Don't push me, Ethan. His entire body tensed. Are you threatening me? He asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Heather gave a small shrug. Call it what you will. I want more than hush money. I want a comfortable life for myself and my child, and I expect you to be involved. Ethan exhaled slowly, his patience unraveling. I will support my child, he said carefully, but I won't be manipulated into a relationship for show. My lawyers can arrange co-parenting terms once the baby is born. Heather's eyes brimmed with angry tears. "You'll regret this," she whispered. "Don't think your precious Juliana can save you from the fallout." She stormed out, heels clicking against the marble floor. Ethan sat frozen, the tension in his muscles refusing to fade. His entire life had become a minefield. One wrong step and everything he had built would explode. 2 weeks later, fate intervened. At a secluded lakeside inn, Juliana was resting when a sharp, sudden cramp tore through her abdomen. Her breath hitched. Something was wrong. Panic gripped her as she clutched the edge of the bed. She was only 7 months along, too early for labor. "Marjorie," she gasped. Within seconds, her best friend rushed into the room, eyes wide with alarm. Juliana doubled over in pain, her hands instinctively cradling her stomach. Marjorie didn't hesitate. She grabbed her phone, her fingers shaking as she dialed 911. Within minutes, sirens pierced the quiet serenity of the inn. As paramedics arrived, Juliana felt the fear crash over her like a tidal wave. She wasn't ready for this. Not yet. But ready or not, her baby was coming. Paramedics rushed Juliana into the emergency room as the ambulance lights flickered against the darkening sky. Word traveled fast. Victor Langley, her father, wasted no time calling Ethan. The moment Ethan heard the words, "Juliana, hospital," his heart nearly stopped. Without hesitation, he grabbed his keys and drove, his mind racing faster than the car speeding upstate. By the time he reached the small regional hospital, his hair was disheveled, his suit wrinkled, and his breathing unsteady. A nurse recognized his name immediately. "She's stable," she reassured him, leading him toward the waiting area. Ethan barely registered her words. His eyes scanned the hallway until they landed on Victor, standing near a vending machine. Victor's glare was cold, but for once, he said nothing. Tension thickened between them, but before Ethan could speak, a doctor emerged. "Premature contractions," the doctor explained. "Likely triggered by stress. We were able to stabilize her, but she'll need strict bed rest for the remainder of her pregnancy." Ethan felt his chest tighten. Stress. Had he done this to her? The weight of regret pressed hard against him as he made his way toward Juliana's room, uncertain if she would even allow him inside. The door creaked open. She was lying against crisp white sheets, her skin pale, exhaustion evident in every line of her face. When her gaze met his, tears welled in her eyes, but her expression remained guarded. Marjorie sat beside her, protective as ever, watching him with cautious disapproval. Ethan swallowed hard, then stepped forward. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice raw, "for everything." Juliana took a shaky breath. "The baby is stable for now," she said quietly, "but I have to stay here until the doctors are sure. It was too close." Ethan exhaled sharply, sinking into the chair beside her bed. "God, Juliana, I never meant for this to happen. I never wanted you to be hurt." A flicker of anger crossed her features, dull but still present beneath the exhaustion. "But you did," she murmured. "You shattered my heart. And you put this baby at risk." Her hand reflexively moved to her belly, a protective gesture that nearly broke him. Ethan bowed his head. "I know, if it means anything, it's over with Heather. I've signed the papers. I told her there's nothing left between us." Juliana studied him through tear-filled eyes. Pain lingered, but so did something else. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you," she admitted, her voice trembling. "But I don't want to hold on to hate either." Ethan's breath caught in his throat. "If we can figure out a way to be civil for our child's sake, maybe one day I can learn to trust you again." His eyes burned as he nodded. "I'll do anything," he promised. "Take all the time you need." Juliana closed her eyes, exhaustion washing over her. For now, that was all she had to give. In the sterile quiet of the hospital room, the only sound was the rhythmic beeping of monitors. No further words were exchanged, but in that moment, a fragile flicker of hope remained. Whether it would grow into reconciliation or crumble under the weight of betrayal was yet to be seen. Juliana spent nearly 2 weeks under strict bed rest. Ethan remained nearby, visiting during allowed hours, bringing fresh flowers or reading softly to her. Slowly, the thick tension between them thawed, though the pain still lingered like a wound that refused to heal. Marjorie and Victor kept a watchful eye, ensuring Ethan respected boundaries. Meanwhile, Heather's threats fizzled into silence. No explosive headlines, no sudden public spectacle. Rumors swirled that she had left the city, possibly waiting for Ethan's financial support rather than igniting a scandal. With Lockwood Enterprises under scrutiny, Ethan announced his temporary step back from daily operations to focus on personal matters. Investors remained cautious, but they respected his candor. When Juliana was finally discharged, she agreed, reluctantly, to return to the Hamptons estate. But there was one condition. Ethan would temporarily move to his Manhattan condo. She needed peace, a space that felt hers alone. He agreed without argument, knowing it was another step toward regaining her trust. Back home, Juliana found that Lucinda and the staff had prepared a warm, stress-free environment. The once grand bedroom she shared with Ethan felt different now, but at least it no longer felt suffocating. She poured herself into preparing a nursery, allowing a quiet excitement to build for the baby's arrival. Despite her complicated feelings about Ethan, the life growing inside her deserved happiness. They maintained a careful truce. Ethan visited only on weekends, always calling ahead, never overstepping. He arranged top-tier medical care for Juliana and began legal proceedings to establish formal custody terms with Heather, ensuring that his responsibilities were handled properly. Step by painful step, he dismantled the lies that had once defined him. As Juliana's due date approached, she noticed subtle changes in Ethan. He was humbler, more patient. He apologized often but never demanded forgiveness. The household staff, once cold toward him, had softened, offering polite nods when he arrived. Even Victor, though still wary, acknowledged that Ethan was making an effort. Then, on a crisp autumn morning, everything changed. Juliana woke with a sharp pain, gripping the edge of the bed. The contractions had begun. Ethan, who had stayed overnight in a guest room at her request, rushed to her side. Hours later, they brought a healthy baby girl into the world. The moment Juliana heard their daughter's first cry, tears of relief and joy filled her eyes. Ethan, holding their newborn daughter with trembling hands, felt the overwhelming weight of what he had nearly lost. The sound of their daughter's first cry shattered the heavy silence of the hospital room. Juliana gasped, her breath catching as relief and joy overwhelmed her. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she reached out, her fingers trembling as she touched the delicate skin of her newborn daughter. Across from her, Ethan held the baby in his arms, his hands unsteady. For the first time in his life, he felt something beyond wealth, power, or regret. This tiny, fragile life, his daughter, their daughter, was more precious than anything he had ever known. In the weeks that followed, they navigated sleepless nights, diaper changes, and the tender wonder of baby smiles. Juliana, though hesitant, allowed Ethan to be present for their daughter's first milestones. She watched him from a distance as he cradled the baby, whispering promises she wasn't sure he could keep. It wasn't a restoration of trust, but perhaps the beginning of something new. For the first time in ages, Ethan felt the weight of regret slowly shift, tempered by the fragile hope of redemption. He had torn his marriage apart, but now, with unwavering commitment and honesty, he held on to the possibility of a future, one where Juliana and their daughter could feel safe and cherished again. Only time would tell if that vision could truly flourish. For now, they stood at the threshold of a second chance. A chapter in their lives had closed, one marked by heartbreak, betrayal, and the unexpected gift of new life. Juliana's choice to remove her wedding ring and walk away had forced Ethan to confront his own darkness. By nearly losing everything, he had come to understand the true weight of loyalty and the devastating cost of neglecting love. Would their fragile reconciliation grow into something real? Would the wounds of betrayal ever truly heal? Or would the ghosts of past mistakes forever cast shadows on their future? Only time would tell. But for now, there was hope. 5 years later, the sun dipped low over the Hamptons estate, casting golden light across the garden. Laughter echoed through the crisp autumn air. The sound of a little girl chasing fireflies, her giggles filling the space with warmth. Juliana stood on the porch, watching her daughter Charlotte, now 5 years old, run barefoot through the grass. 5 years ago, she had walked away. 5 years ago, she had sworn she would never let herself be broken again. And yet, here she was, standing in the same place she once thought she'd never return to. But this time, everything was different. Behind her, a familiar presence stepped up, wrapping his arms gently around her waist. Ethan pressed a soft kiss to her temple, his embrace no longer filled with fear of losing her, but with the quiet confidence of a man who had fought for his family and won. She leaned into him, closing her eyes for a moment, feeling the steady rhythm of his heart. They had been through hell and back, but somehow, through years of patience, growth, and love, they had found their way home. Ethan had spent those years proving himself, not with grand gestures, but with consistency. He had been there for Charlotte every morning, every bedtime story, every scraped knee. More importantly, he had been there for Juliana, not asking for forgiveness, but earning it. Slowly, piece by piece, they had rebuilt what was once lost. Juliana turned in his arms, looking up at the man she had once thought she could never trust again. But trust, like love, had a way of growing back when nurtured. She reached up, her fingers tracing along the edge of his jaw. "You never gave up," she whispered. "Not for a second," he murmured. "I would have waited a lifetime." Charlotte's voice interrupted them, filled with excitement. "Mommy! Daddy! Look! I caught one!" She held up her tiny hands, a glowing firefly flickering between her fingers. Juliana smiled, and Ethan let out a soft chuckle. "That's incredible, sweetheart," Ethan said, crouching down beside her. "Just like you." Charlotte grinned, her blue eyes so much like her mother's, shining with happiness. As Juliana knelt beside them, Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out something small and familiar. Her wedding ring. The same one she had left behind all those years ago. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. She met his gaze, her heart pounding, not with fear, but with certainty. With tears brimming in her eyes, she slid the ring back onto her finger. This time it wasn't a symbol of broken promises. It was a promise renewed. Ethan exhaled, pressing his forehead against hers, his voice barely above a whisper. "I love you, Juliana." She smiled, feeling the weight of the past finally lift. "I love you too." As Charlotte danced around them, twirling in the firefly's glow, Juliana realized something. They had already won. Love wasn't about perfection, it was about choosing each other. Every single day. And after 5 long years, she was finally home. If you've been moved by this powerful story of a pregnant wife's courage, a billionaire husband's betrayal, and the long road to redemption, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us bring you more raw, unfiltered tales of love, loss, and second chances. Thank you for watching.